My name is McKeown. I'm 92 years old. I was in the U.S. Army Air Force. The Air Force as an entity did not exist at that time, and there was also a Navy Air Force, which still exists, I think. I went in at age 18, was discharged at age 21. So I was in the service 3 years, 1943 to 1946. 3 years and about 7 or 8 days, something like that. Here's a copy of the discharge. And this is a button you wore on your uniform going home from the discharge center. It was fondly referred to as a ruptured duck. The draft at that time included everybody. Of course, we don't have a draft now. It's an all-volunteer Army and military force, I would say. But at that time, there were very few exceptions to the draft. If you were male, when you turned 18, you were drafted. And there was no exception for being in college as there was later. I think during the Vietnam era, there was that exception. But I was in college at the time, and I saw that I could get another quarter of college in if I joined the reserve. So I joined the Army Reserve, and that was it enabled me to complete another quarter of college, and so at that time, what I wanted was to be in an Air Force band. I had actually auditioned for a Navy band and passed the audition, but I couldn't join because I'd already joined the Army. Then we had to go through another classification process. If you could pass the physical, there was one classification, and that's aerial gunner. And the life expectancy of an aerial gunner was about 5 missions. That's bombing missions. And I kept saying, I want to audition for the band. And finally, some master sergeant, the guys who run the Army that have all these stripes, we call them zebras. Some master sergeant said, you can't audition for the band without you see the colonel. Well, I didn't know to be afraid of colonels, and so I said, may I see the colonel? Well, that shocked him, but he gave me permission to see the colonel. So I went in and I did all the military salutes and everything as best I knew how. I said, sir, I would like to audition for the band. And he said, sure, son, we'll get you an audition. What do you play? At that point, I learned the higher up they are, the nicer they can afford to be. And at the end of the basic training, every day there'd be a few names called out. You go out there and you stand at the curb, and a Jeep comes by and picks you up, and it takes you, you're in Miami. The only way to go is north, so it takes you to the railroad station. So here I was standing on the curb by myself that morning, and the Jeep driver came by, and he had an envelope with all my papers and everything, and the sealed orders. He knew where to take me. He went around the corner and to the next building and said, this is, said, actually he said, get your ass out. This is where you go. And it was the band building. So that was how I found out I'd gotten the assignment that I wanted. My time in the service was really good for me. And I think now every young guy, I hadn't made up my mind about women, but I think every young guy should be required to do one year, 18 months, or 2 years in the service. I had never known anybody who was either not planning to go to college or who hadn't been to college before I went in the service. And there I found out there's a whole world of other people like that. And it's a unifying factor for the country as well as a security aspect. Going overseas from New York to Le Havre, France, submarines were a concern, and we took a zigzag route so as to confound or avoid the submarines some way. And they would, we were with a convoy, in a convoy, escorted by Navy ships, and we would hear depth charges dropped every once in a while. We got used to what they sounded like, and so we knew that submarines were a concern. We prepared a show, have nothing else to do on board ship, so it's an amateur show, sort of. And it was to be presented the final night. Well, the final full day out, one of our ships in the convoy left and turned northward, which we knew was toward England. We were traveling under sealed orders and didn't know where we were going, but we knew we were going east, and so that meant to Europe. And this ship sailed up toward England, and before they got out of sight of the convoy, they were hit, and black smoke erupted. So that made us a little apprehensive. Then the show that night was canceled because the sea was just like a tabletop. It was just as smooth as glass, and there was a full moon. And so it was perfect weather for submarines. And the next morning early, we heard explosions. And these explosions were not the depth charge sound that we'd gotten used to coming overseas, but were much closer, so we assumed we'd been hit. And nobody said anything. There were 28 men in our little stateroom, stacked high, and 4 high or so in bunks. And all you could hear was shoelaces. Everybody was lacing up their shoes to get up on deck and get in the lifeboats or whatever might be available. And it turned out that it was depth charges, but they were detonated much closer to the ship than any others had been. And that was why we thought we'd been hit. So it was a false alarm, but it was scary. Being stationed at the French Riviera was quite a happy time. But all good things come to an end, so it didn't last forever. But you know, I had said we were at this reception camp where we had no showers. It was just really primitive. And we were there for a long time. Well, we had to compete for an assignment to be the official band for the R&R Center at the French Riviera, and we won. And so we went from from this primitive camp via 40 and 8. Now 40 and 8, that's a holdover from World War I. They are box cars, and on the side it has stenciled capacity, this is in French, capacity 40 horses, no, 40 men or 8 horses. And so we went from that, and it took us about 5 days to go from Normandy down to the Mediterranean coast, known as the Riviera, and we were billeted where the troops on leave were, which was a luxury French hotel. This is a souvenir of the time, and the Angleterre Hotel was where we were, where we were billeted, and it was first class service. I mean, waiters with peppermint striped vests and everything, serving at the table with white tablecloths and nice china and silver. It was unbelievable. They even had a string orchestra playing for lunch and dinner. We had our own duties there. We had rehearsal every day at 10 o'clock and late because we had to work nights. We worked 6 nights in Nice and 1 night a week 20 miles away in Cannes. We got transferred abruptly from Nice to a desert area around Marseille. Right now that area is known as Provence, but then it was a desert, and we were back in tents, sleeping on the ground. We used to be the French Riviera official band, and we're being just wasted now because they're not using us for anything. And they said, well, we've got the Bob Hope show coming next week. And so they put us with the Bob Hope show. Well, that was a kick. And apparently we did well enough. So from then on, we went with show after show. USO was great. They kept sending shows over. Now, not all of them were big like Bob Hope, but some of them were. Some of them were small. Some of them were not too good, but they were all professional. And the Hope show would play. There would be an outdoor stage and troops as far as you could see to the horizon. I don't know how many. And Bob Hope, he doesn't have to work at being funny. Everything he said brought a laugh, whether he meant it or not. But he was probably the best. The number one performer for the military during World War II and later. Some of us were in the town of Rouen, and the MPs came by and told us to go back to the base. The war was going to end. That was the war in Europe, and that was the end. We did move to Camp Lucky Strike during that time. And Lucky Strike was where the the Americans who had been prisoners of the Germans were released, were liberated, and processed back through Lucky Strike. And by that time, they decided we weren't going anywhere, so they put us to work. And we played for General Eisenhower. He came to address the liberated prisoners, and we played for the ceremony. After the war in Europe ended, we were still there And I say we, the entire Army was still there. And the plan was for all of us to go to Japan or to the Pacific and participate in the island-to-island war in Japan, which is Iwo Jima was the only example we'd had at that time, and that's one of the bloodiest things you could think of. So we came back from a gig when we were based in the Marseille area, which is a port, and people were already going through there on troop ships to go from Europe to Japan. And the reason we were there was to entertain the troops and keep them happy as could be. But we came back from a gig, and we were told by the charge of quarters, who looks after the place while we're gone, that they'd dropped some kind of a new bomb, and of course it was the atom bomb on Hiroshima. And that's how we heard that the war in Japan had ended. One really emotional moment, coming home on a troop ship, no air, on a troop ship, and seeing the Statue of Liberty. It is a really emotional experience. And the day before that, and this took us about 7 days to cross the Atlantic. The day before that, we came in range of United States radio stations. No TV then, but radio, and the NBC chimes were something that played every hour or so. And to hear just those 3 notes on the radio was emotional. It was one of the most emotional experiences of my life, coming home.